My name is Holger Seim. I'm the Director of Drama Studies at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and I'm here with Tanya Rintoul, who's the Director of Orlando. And we'll do the director interviews. So, Tanya, I thought I'd start as a professor would with talking about the text. And so this is a really fascinating play based on a novel, and the form of the play sort of shifts back and forth between narrative and direct dialogue. Often, sometimes the same character sort of moves from talking about him or herself into being that character. And so I was just wondering how did you navigate that in rehearsal and in the process, that those shifts?
I mean, it's interesting how often the actors want to stay with their scene partner. Like, it makes sense that we want to talk to each other. And also being in a rehearsal hall where there is no audience, there's an obstacle to finding connection out there. But I really started to find that anytime there was narration, it actually is for the audience.
Oh, interesting.
And there are a couple exceptions, but we played with it. We tried different, I really let them follow their instincts there too. And the deeper we got, the clearer it was that those are moments for them to connect. And especially when a character, like there's so many asides also.
Yes.
Where a character's in the scene and then stepping out and speaking to the audience. And as a way to, as novels do so well, share an inner experience of a character.
Yeah. Interesting. So in some ways, like those moments when a character speaks about themselves in the third person, we're actually closer in their mind than. That's kind of fascinating. Interesting. So when you said that, like sometimes it's in a scene, and many of those scenes are so short, right? At least on the page. Like, how was that a challenge, giving those scenes more space to breathe, or was it more question of like getting everything into those compressed moments?
There is not a lot of space to breathe in this play.
Yeah.
In fact, we were just spending some time with the final sound cue in the play, and it really feels like that is the first breath that we take.
Wow.
It really just goes. And even transitions are usually with narration underneath them. Again, a few exceptions. But it's a sort of relentless moving train that everyone hops on, and they're all on stage the whole time as well. So
right. And so if they're all on stage at the same time, right? And there's this relentless pace. How did you sort of negotiate the sort of shifts of like from one person being one character and then another within a split second? Is that?
We started to find, Sarah Rule wrote the play without assigning the chorus. The chorus sections are just meant to be assigned.
Yeah.
And so we really used where people were in space and in relation physically to the action to figure out like who was getting the ball and moving us to the next moment. And then likewise, who had just ended up in a spot in which we're like literally holding the space physically with the bodies of the chorus and building walls, building architecture in a non-literal sense.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, so a lot of the sort of on paper kind of crazy scene changes and events, like when the skating was the first one, I think, where people are skating, and I was like, how? But also like some of the radical shifts in setting and so on are literally just shifts of bodies in space.
And lighting. Lighting is anchoring time of day, anchoring location, anchoring passage of time.
Yeah. So how important I mean, this is a play that skips over 400 years. Right? Like, how important was like the specificity of those periods to you?
Well, Melinda Little did a lot of work with the students on period movement, and they got to go through the periods with her and talk about the physicality, the clothing, and they got to spend a lot of time embodying those periods and thinking about what it would be like to wear the costumes that they are not in fact wearing in the show. The chorus costumes don't change. So they are evoking the feeling of wearing a corset, but they're not actually wearing them.
Right.
I've lost track of what your original question was.
No, well, the period differences, but that's actually when you sort of combined with
Yeah, well, and the thing about, for me, this play in relation to period is that Orlando as a character is challenging and questioning what it means to exist in these constraints and in these rules, and changing that relationship through gender, also through relationship to other, to status, to all these things.
Yeah.
And I feel that there's a contemporary lens there too, of like looking back over that time. And that's a shift for the chorus as well, that sometimes they are looking at a scene from their contemporary lens.
Yeah.
And sometimes they are part of the scene in the world of the period.
Yeah.
So it sort of shifts in that way too.
Well, which makes sense, right? I mean, that sort of tracks with the dramaturgy of the text. I mean, it's the same, like the narrative voice kind of has to be from the present day, right? And so that's neat. Okay, like what you just said is, I think, really interesting. Like that Orlando is sort of challenging or questioning everything, and gender is one major aspect of this, obviously, but not the only one, which is I think really interesting, because like I think the one thing that if people know anything about Virginia Woolf's Orlando, it's like, well, it's the novel in which a man becomes a woman, so spontaneously. But so to you, that's like a major part of what is a sort of more wholesale questioning of conventions and boundaries and rules.
Absolutely, yeah. And what makes a person, and how we observe a person, and what we understand of who they are from what they look like and how we see them, but also being that person and receiving perception, and how that also affects how we behave.
Right, because that happens so much, like within the novel and the play. Right? I guess that, like, it's not just that people watch Orlando all the time; they keep telling him or her what they think he or she looks like.
Yes. And objectify the character quite a lot.
The legs.
Yes. Yeah. And that's actually much more present even in the novel than it is in the play. Like, it's present in the play, but in the novel, it's like, we're just constantly hearing about Orlando's legs. Which I think, because the novel Virginia Woolf wrote as a love letter to Vita Sackville West, I imagine that Vita's legs must have been something very special.
So you're saying we're getting to read Virginia Woolf objectifying her lover in a way in the stuff. Okay, so let's talk about that actually. Since it is an adaptation of a novel that obviously has to stand on its own feet as a play as well, and does, I think. But like for you as a director, how important was the novel in your process?
I mean, it was pretty important to sort of fill in information that we don't get. It's also interesting to see what Sarah Ruhl pulled directly from the novel. Like, most of the narration is verbatim, exactly what is said. But the storytelling and knowing Virginia Woolf's work and life is so present in the story of Orlando for me, that I actually, like, I turn to Virginia Woolf most often when I'm thinking about what the layers are of the world and what is underneath action, like Orlando returning to a state of melancholy is something that occurs often, and that was a part of Virginia's experience, certainly. And I've really let that lead certain moments. Yeah. So
is that, would that also have been like part of the process, that we like share with the cast what is in the novel, or like what at a particular moment, like that sort of thing?
we didn't have a lot of time.
Yes.
I sent them all a copy of the novel and asked them to read it, and we would talk about it here and there. But it's so almost unconscious to me that like I can look at my copy and I underlined things and I wrote little notes, but those things are not actually what are driving the play for me. They're just sort of like living underneath. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So it's sort of the backstory to your work in a way. Like it's the subtext. The novel is the subtext to the direction. That's kind of neat. But there wasn't anything where you like had read the novel and you looked at the play and were like, oh, I wish that were in the play.
No, that didn't happen. But I also was looking at the novel through the lens of the play.
Right.
Versus the novel, the play through the lens of the novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I haven't had that feeling. I feel like there are many different plays that could occur through that novel.
Right.
And this is one version, and this version focuses on love and what it is to be an artist and what it is to try to communicate a human experience and to understand one's purpose and place.
That's why the poem and the oak tree are like the guiding.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess in the set design, the oak tree is a fairly central element as well that never goes away. Right?
Yeah, Leslie and I talked about the oak tree as the center of everything that comes into this world. And quite literally, a lot of what happens on stage comes from the tree physically.
oh, cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think I can imagine what you're talking about, but that sounds really neat. Interesting.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's been fun to play with. And again, like exploring with the actors, like what happens if we treat the tree like this, and really engaging with it as a cast member almost. Yeah.
Can I ask you, so we've talked about process a bit, right? But I'm sort of wondering, so with a play like this, in which basically everyone but Orlando is constantly inhabiting different persons, and even Orlando obviously changes in some ways so much, and in other ways not.
Yeah.
Like, are there, like, what would you say, like, you know, the approach to acting is in a show like this? Is like, is a mode of realism still a guiding principle, or?
I would say, to me, I think, and this wasn't a conscious choice I made when I began the process, but when I reflect on the process, I feel like I was really turning to absurdism and surrealism and symbolism, and those to me are still the like authentic expressions of a real thing. It's not just because we're not looking at it in the way we look at a reality in like film or kitchen sink drama.
Yes.
Like the characters' hearts and experiences are must be real to them.
Right.
But we can still like bend and twist them and heighten them in ways that make them not necessarily feel quite that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And was there a difference in how you worked with, say, like, well, basically with everyone but Orlando?
I would say yes. I mean, with Orlando, we've just had to have a lot, like Zoe and I just have to chat more about, like, where are you at right now? How do you feel about what just happened? What are we carrying with us into the next moment? Whereas with the chorus, it's like, what's the story? Where are we?
Yeah.
Who are we? and much more physical and much more big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really, I mean, it makes perfect sense, of course, but it's interesting that like Orlando is like the only, as an actor, like the Orlando actor is the only one who has an actual arc, right?
Yes. And then there are some longer scenes that feel more like literally two people talking in chairs. Well, they're not real chairs, but anyway, that's the space that it would be. So there is like relationship.
Yes.
But both big and small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, obviously there's some characters that sort of reappear, like Sasha and Queen Elizabeth and so on, that sort of show up at various points. But Orlando sort of is kind of the only figure we get to see, purposely the only figure we sort of get to see develop.
Yeah.
And that obviously, what you said, like it obviously makes a difference for how to act that, right, as opposed to a multitude of different. Cool. All right, this is exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this will look like on this amazing, bright white, very wide and capacious set that will clearly be filled with imagination and fantasy and some humor too, I imagine.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you.
Well, it remains for me to say that Orlando opens on Thursday, November 23rd, and then runs for 2 weeks. Tickets are available through the UTM Theatre English and Drama website and via Theatre Sheridan. And we hope to see many of you there.